This is Michael Yon. He's reporting from currently Panama, and so we're having a little trouble in and out with his link, but he looks like he's got it fixed for right now. And so I'll read a little intro so you know who he is. Michael Yon is America's most experienced living combat correspondent and has covered many wars and conflicts, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Thailand, Hong Kong, and the Chinese Communist Party's information war. In February 2020, Hong Kong denied his reentry and deported him to Thailand. He has since returned to the US. Michael Yon needs your support in the fight against communism and communist China and will report on related growing civil war in United States. Donations through his Michael Yon Patreon page, donations also through PayPal, and we'll put that in the live link in the description box below. So, hi, Michael.
Hello from Panama.
Anyway, let's get at the main thing that we wanted to talk about was you're obviously knowledgeable about Antifa and perhaps their relationship to the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. And since there's been a real lack of honest reporting on that topic, for example, we did a live stream during that, and we had a reporter on the ground at where Trump was speaking, and our reporter could tell who the Antifa people were beforehand, and so he kind of followed them. They all, on cue, left the Trump speech, and he reported live on YouTube Live that they were changing out of their black Antifa gear and putting on Trump hats and headed towards the Capitol. So, but that's never been reported in the mainstream media. And so I'll let you take it from there, whatever background you can give us on Antifa.
Are you worried about your online privacy? Well, you should be. Nothing works as well as Virtual Shield VPN. Virtual Shield lets you browse the web completely anonymously. So the big-name internet service providers and their third parties will not be able to monitor and sell your internet activity and browsing history. When using our VPN service, your traffic is routed through our secure and encrypted servers. The good news is it's completely free for 30 days, and we can host Mac, Windows, iPhone, iPad, Android, or Chrome. Personal, family, and business plans are available. Just click on the live link in the description box below for more information.
Right. I've been watching Antifa for some time. You may hear some background noise, by the way, because I am outside and the Pan Am highways to my right, and you'll hear jungle birds and that sort of thing. But I was out with Antifa actually in Hong Kong. Many of the Antifa from the United States came into Hong Kong, and I was sitting at tables with them often or out in the actual fighting. I was out there for 7 months until they kicked me out. And so I eventually came back to the United States. I went straight to Portland. I had been out of the United States almost entirely for about 10 years, off in war zones and that sort of thing, for the most of the last 20 years, actually. But so I went back to Portland and went straight to Antifa. And so I was out there with Antifa in Portland and dressed like a bum often on the streets and just out there in the fighting as they attacked the police and attacked the courthouse and that sort of thing, listening to them, reading all their literature. There's many homeless there, so it was kind of easy to kind of bum around and carry around, like a bag and look like you're a bum. And so I was just with them quite a lot. I went down to Atlanta. I was with them in Atlanta. I got a hotel at Black Lives Matter Plaza down there in Washington, D.C., stayed there for about 6 months. I was out there, 6 weeks. I was out there with them constantly in Washington, D.C., right at Black Lives Matter Plaza. I could see Black Lives Matter Plaza right outside my window because I got a corner room right there at the plaza. And so, and then I was there at the Capitol attack. I was there for the speech, Donald Trump's speech, and there were clearly some Antifa there. That's the way they roll, by the way. They use these techniques. If you read the Antifa handbook and other literature that they put out, this is just how they operate. It's normal for them to do false flags, agent provocateur work, clowning work, if you know what I mean by clowning, and different sorts of behaviors that are quite predictable if you've spent as much time in protest as I have, which would be years hundreds of protests, whether it's Hong Kong or Thailand or Nepal or wherever. Some things are quite easy to spot. For instance, agent provocateurs are actually quite easy to spot if you know what you're looking for. For many people, agent provocateurs are considered something exotic. When we started talking about agent provocateurs after January 6th, many Americans are like, what? This is some sort of exotic thing. It's, it's even a French word. It's like, it's not exotic at all. I see them all the time. And, when you see Antifa changing clothes and going into the action in cells as they do, their cells are quite easy to spot. If you know what you're looking for, they can be incredibly easy to spot. Cells almost always will join forces outside of protest. And this is not just Antifa, this is all over the world. They'll join together outside, they'll go do their action inside, and then they'll often leave together unless there's some kind of fighting going on, and they might leave spread out and that sort of thing. But I was there. I did not go inside the Capitol building because that obviously could have been a felony, and I didn't want to go to prison. But I was outside and watching what happened. There was many cells acting. There were many agent provocateurs. Clearly, Antifa was heavily involved. It's quite obvious.
Collagen is the most abundant protein in your body and is essentially the glue that holds you together. In fact, after age 20, people produce 12% less collagen in their skin each decade. Collagen depletion is what makes you look old. Most collagen supplements do not provide the hydrolyzed bioactive collagen peptides that enable your body to digest collagen properly, plus it tastes badly. BioTrust gives you the 5 most available kinds of collagens that dissolve easily in hot or cold liquids with zero taste. You can add it to your coffee, tea, or smoothies, or even baked goods recipes. So to look and feel younger fast, go to www.healthwithbill.com.
But I've been doing it for years, and it's quite, it's my office, and this is what I do. So when I go to actions like this, I'm automatically looking for cells. Just as when I go near a lake or a river in Florida, I'm automatically watching for alligators and snakes and that sort of thing. It's just like, okay, here we are near the water in Florida. Where's the alligators? Where's the snakes? And that's the same as I do when I go to these actions, whether it's in Atlanta or in Thailand or Nepal or whatever. I'm instantly looking for cells. I'm instantly looking for the ringleaders. I'm looking for recognition symbols for the cells. I'm looking for clowning behavior. That's a separate sort of behavior.
What is clowning?
Clowning is a type of false flag. So in order to get to that, let's talk about false flags. False flags is kind of self-descriptive. People will do things wearing your uniform, wearing your whatever, and to try to usually blame it on somebody else. False flags normally are always to blame somebody for something, right? And so clowning is a type of false flag. Clowning is a behavior that you see all the time when you see somebody and they say they're on your side, but they continuously do things that make you look very, very bad. But they claim to be on your side enough that your side generally doesn't want to throw them out. You know what I mean? They're like the Second Amendment supporters that go into Starbucks carrying double-barrel shotguns around all the kids. Like, hey, I'm very pro Second Amendment, but and I know it's your legal right, but this is stupid. I mean, you're just making people hate us. Yeah. And so that's what clowns do. And I see, like, Ali Akbar is the guy's name. I talked with him several times. I saw him in Washington, D.C. Since that time, he's been outed as a clown. First time I met him, I told my partner that I was with, I was training on this sort of stuff. I said, I think that guy's a clown, actually. For instance, Ali Akbar was speaking out in the National Mall there in D.C., and he was talking about, he's all, pro-Trump and all these sorts of things. And then he's going, we're going to burn this place down. We're going to block all the roads. We're going to block the ports and all this. I'm like, the guy is clowning. He's trying to make, because Trump supporters are not actually generally like that at all. Yeah. They're kind of the opposite. Yeah. They're the people that just kind of want to go to school and, and go play baseball or something, right? And so they're not, and so when he's up there talking about, going to war and that sort of thing, well, anyway, since that time, he's actually been outed as a clown. But if you've seen these enough, when I would take people, and I used to hunt alligators when I was a kid. I used to catch them with my hands. My grandfather taught me. So I can spot an alligator that fast. I can go, there's a gator in the weeds over there. And people I'm with, they're like, where? I don't see it. And I'll like, throw a stick right beside that stick, and they still can't see it because it's not a survival instinct to them. But for me, it's firmware. Since I was a little boy, I was swimming, and if I can't spot that gator before he spots me, it could be a problem, because I didn't stay in the pool. I would stay in the lake. And so it's the same when I go to these protests. It's part of my firmware. I'm instantly looking for these guys. And so I can spot them quite quickly because I've done it for so many years now. And I will say this, at the Capitol attack, it was a very complex aquarium. There wasn't just one sort of fish. Everybody was at the party. There were Proud Boys, there were 3%ers, there were all that. But the ultimate actions inside the attacks, that clearly was Antifa and BLM. That's very obviously a BLM and Antifa.
Where do they get their money? I mean, Hong Kong, Portland, Washington.
Actually, it can be pretty cheap to do a lot of these things. And a lot of them are actually children of privilege as well. I mean, a lot of people might think that, that it's very expensive to travel, for instance, but often it's more of the price of the plane ticket's the biggest cost, right? Yeah. But I mean, if you're living like a backpacker and that sort of thing, it's not very expensive. I backpacked when I was younger around the world, and quite a lot. And it's actually, a lot of people would say, where did you get the money? I said, actually, it's more expensive to sit home in Florida and do nothing than it is to travel the world. And I mean, literally. And I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's actually true. And people that have traveled like this know. Now, so let's get down to that. When you look at the pie chart of the people who get involved in this stuff, that 1%, let's just call them 1%. That's your GF, that's your guerrilla force. Those are the ones that travel all over the place and actually do actions. Those are the ones in Afghanistan. I spent 2 years in Afghanistan. We call those big T Taliban. They're your full-time Taliban, right? Or your full-time Antifa. And by the way, this is whether we're talking Antifa or Taliban or Al-Qaeda or anything else, the same sort of pie chart holds true. You'll have that tiny sliver that's a full-timer, totally dedicated. They'll travel very far to fight. The next part of the pie chart we call auxiliary. So the first part, GF, that's your full-timers. The next part of the pie chart is auxiliary. Auxiliary will fight you in their neighborhoods. So if you go to Portland, they might be from 5 minutes away. They might see you out the window and come down, right? Because they live in apartments there. Like, for instance, down by the ICE building in Portland, where I've been quite a few times. I spent quite a bit of time in Portland. There's apartments right there that some of them, they live right there. I mean, they go downstairs and they go fight. And then they go back upstairs. I mean, they don't have to bring anything. I mean, they can see the fight from their apartment. So, I mean, that's auxiliary, right? Now, that's an auxiliary role. And they will also play a support role. The next part of the pie chart is support. So that's always the biggest part of the pie chart, no matter, well, not always, let's be careful with that. But almost always the biggest part of the pie chart is what we call support. Support will supply money. They supply intelligence. They supply places to stay. In Hong Kong, support. These were the good guys in Hong Kong. Support. I'm not talking about Antifa. I'm talking about the Hong Kong resistance. There were doctors that would set up clinics in apartments near the fighting zones. That's support, right? You need doctors. You got to have nurses. You got to have. There were grandmothers out there, literally grandmothers, because the police would not mess with the grandmothers. I've always learned throughout all this sort of work, the grandmothers know more about what's going on, and they can get more done because people won't pay attention to them. But they're part of the support network, and they would come and pick the fighters up sometimes when they were getting surrounded. The grandmothers would come in their cars and literally pick them up and drive them away. That's support element work. So support usually doesn't fight unless you corner them up in their own home, right? Auxiliary will fight, but they fight in their own neighborhood. Very close, usually not one day march away from the fight. The GF, that one small sliver, that's your guerrilla force. Those are the ones that fly into Washington, D.C. and fight unless they already live there, right? So you'll have a mixture of the GF. You'll have a mixture of the auxiliary who just happen to live in Washington, D.C. and may or may not be GF as well. And then there's a big support base there because Washington, D.C. is just loaded with left-wing trouble. BLM practically owns part of the city. It's amazing. BLM and Antifa obviously are separate, but they do, well, Antifa, as you can see, has leached on to BLM to do, you know, all the things that you can see them doing.
So riots and fighting and all that.
Right.
How is Antifa organized?
Well, they're organized much the way the Taliban was, actually, much the way many of these organizations are, insofar as mostly they're not organized. So like the mosquitoes in the jungle here, the mosquitoes don't get into a guerrilla band and come get you. You know,
They seem like they do.
Yeah, they do. They seem like it. I mean, you get close and they start tracking on your carbon dioxide and all that, and your movement, right? So, but
they target me.
Yeah. But usually they won't like get on a jet and come get you. You know what I mean? That's your guerrilla force mosquitoes. You know, you're like that's your guerrilla force mosquitoes. But your local force, the auxiliary, many of the Antifa are just local force. They're auxiliary, right? And they'll fight where they're at. So they're not necessarily very organized. They will organize on a local level. Some just come solely sponte. They do it under their own action. They do it under their own funding. Many of them do. You can see that there is not there's not like an Antifa army structure per se. Right. It's the same way as the Taliban was. It's a very distributed organization. And there is some organization, certainly there is, but it's mostly distributed, as is the Taliban, we call it. The big T Taliban are the ones that'll go off to Pakistan and train. They'll come back. They always have better shoes, always watch the shoes. Big T always has good shoes. And Big T, I always watch shoes. And, you know, and Big T will be better kitted out. They'll be more motivated. They'll be more organized. And little T, that's the local farmer. They're like, hey, there they are. Let's go get them. And here's one of the buses to pick up. Gonna pick up the migrants. So anyway, speaking of little T and big T, and so so that's, you know, there's not like, for instance, when you kill a Taliban leader, it's not like you killed the leader of the mosquitoes. Oh, okay, they killed the leader of the mosquitoes. All the mosquitoes are going to be dispirited and go home. It's not how it works. I mean, you got to come out and, you know, take more drastic actions. You know, like when I was a kid growing up in Florida, we learned a lot of our mosquito control from right here in Panama because of the Panama Canal and the yellow fever, right? And I'm weaponized against mosquitoes. I'm taught since a child that if I see standing water, I go turn over the water. I'm looking for the wrigglers. Like in Thailand, where my office is in northern Thailand. It's very rainy, like Florida. And the locals around there, they don't watch for the standing water like Florida boys do. First thing I do when I set up my office, I'm like, why is there so many mosquitoes? I go on my mosquito patrol and I find all the standing water. So I bought a bunch of minnows and I put minnows all over my neighborhood in the standing water, right? And so now the mosquito level clearly went down. But that's what we have to do with Antifa. I mean, everybody in their own neighborhood has to take action. And that doesn't mean go shoot them. It doesn't mean that. It means gather information, license tag numbers, names, dates, places, photos when you can without getting, beat up, and because this information will be very valuable later in things like in prosecutions, right?
Right.
But who do you trust to give that information to at this point?
Yeah, well, that's a problem at this point. Yeah, that's obviously become a problem because Antifa, and going back to the mosquito metaphor, that's one of the problems that we have. There's standing water in places like Portland and Atlanta and Washington, D.C. Yeah. And people are not just leaving standing water, they're feeding them. Right. They're creating those conditions because when you go out and you actually see Antifa, these are not your A-team guys. You know what I mean? These are purple-haired people with lips, their faces look like tackle boxes. Yeah. And they're not always subtle. Some are, and a lot aren't. But I mean, they're not always the highest, most sophisticated players in the tree, right? And they exist because, and they continue to burn things down and attack people because we allow it. That's the only reason. If the average American said, that's it, I'm not going to take it anymore, and actually starts doing something about it, listen, ultimately, if the police don't take care of us, we will be in a civil war. War is what I do. War is, I spent most of my life in conflicts and wars, right? This is the conditions. You know, amateurs talk about sparks, professionals talk about conditions. When the conditions are set, the spark will come. When the forest is dry, I don't care if it's a bottle rocket or a lightning strike or somebody threw a cigarette out, the spark is coming from a campfire or something. But here in a rainforest, we're not going to have a forest fire. There was a fire yesterday, actually, and the rain came and put it out. I could see it over in this hill over here. The rain put it out very quickly. So, I mean, but our conditions in the United States are setting for civil war. It's very clear. I've never seen it more clear. I feel like a doctor who's diagnosing cancer.
But when
a civil war between who and who?
Well, that would be very complex, as with, say, for instance, Afghanistan or Iraq. I spent 2 years in Iraq and 2 in Afghanistan. And if you ask me who was fighting whom in Iraq, despite that I was in the middle of that civil war for 2 years, and despite that I was the first one for a year and a half saying it was coming, because I could see it, they were killing each other more than us. It was Sunni against Shia. It was Arabs against Kurds. It was Kurds against Kurds. It was Arabs against Arabs. It was this tribe. It was Al Jabberi tribe against Al Takriti tribe. So it's very complex. It's like which bugs eat which bugs in this jungle over here, right? And it's the same when you get to Afghanistan. It was the same in Thailand. At Thailand, at one point, there were over 80 groups. I just couldn't track them all, right? And so there was no civil war in Thailand. There is in the far south in 3 provinces. United States, there's no question it'll be the same way. It'll be so many groups that even the most dedicated intelligence analyst, unless you're, autistic Rain Man, you're not going to be able to really make sense of it all. It gets very complex. Other than conditions got set and the fire set.
It's very, very difficult for we the people to stand up against some of this stuff when the local mayors and governors and powers that be are telling the police to stand down. So the people are afraid, that they have a lot of fear. To whom do they go? It's like Johnny said, who do you report it to? How do you stand up against it when the police are told to stand down?
Clearly at the government level, because, for instance, I'm from Florida. I was just over in Texas on border issues. Florida and Texas, we've got governors and local leaders that will not allow this. They will not allow this. I'm from Polk County, Florida. Sheriff J.D. Grudd. If you start burning down my town of Winter Haven, Florida, there's going to be shootouts. People are not going to. Antifa does not have the still water to grow their wrigglers into mosquitoes. They can do little actions here and there, but they're not going to own the streets day after day and attack the police department. They're not going to be able to attack people in their homes. We have stand your ground laws. We will fight back. We will really fight back, and we will be defended by the courts because it is our right to live like everybody else and not be attacked in our homes with fire bombs.
But not everybody has Ron DeSantis or Greg Abbott as governors and other people. If you look at what happened in Atlanta, it would be really hard for people to stand up when the mayor and other people were supporting the rioters. So
I was there. I saw it. You're absolutely right. That's the problem. They are setting the conditions of their own demise. Right. And states like Florida and Texas will end up getting migration to them. Because of these people with their incredibly terrible policy, or in some cases, it appears that that's what they're trying to do. And the idiotic idea that a civil war is in their interest. Civil war is in nobody's interest except people that can benefit from the United States going into a full conflagration.
What exactly do you do when you're when you are in the midst of all of this, Portland or all these, like January 6th, what exactly were you doing specifically?
Watching, trying to figure out who's who in the zoo, as we say, which fish here is Antifa, which one's BLM, where's the, Proud Boys, where's the, and by the way, everybody's trying to make out Proud Boys and 3%ers as these white supremacist terrorists.
Right.
And they don't come across like that to me at all. Actually, I don't, they try to make them out to be anti-Asian and that sort of thing, which is just simply untrue.
I have a question about China involvement. uh, do you reach up on the macro level enough to see the hand of the Chinese in there, or are they just applauding whatever's going on? Or
Oh, they're definitely involved, as are Russians, but they have been for many years. Keeping in mind, I've actually written 3 books on Chinese information war, but those are only in Japan because I've been trying to wake up Japan. In fact, I just took a Japanese journalist for several months around the United States into this fighting to warn Japan because I do look at the bigger picture. In fact, I may be off to Taiwan soon. In fact, I look mostly at the bigger picture. I stay often at stratospheric level, and other times I'm down here in a place like Darien. So I go, all up and down the tree, from the roots, to the clouds. And clearly, Chinese information war is very sophisticated. I publish about it all the time. Again, I've published 3 books. They're all in Japanese, unfortunately. None are in English. And I spend, my office is in Asia. I spend a lot of time in China. I spend a lot of time in, just all over Asia. And I'm watching China right here. They're doing huge information war in Panama, for instance, and Colombia, which is borders Panama, is Buenos dias, or Buenos tardes. Sorry, I'm outside. But Panama is under serious Chinese information pressure, as is Colombia. Colombia right now, I was just down in Colombia. They're melting down right now as we speak. They've been fighting each night over in Bogota and other places. And a lot of this clearly is the hand, not only of China, but Russia and Iran, and internally as well. They've become a huge cocaine producer again. They're like the Afghanistan of South America at this point, only more, nicer places, nicer cities than Afghanistan. So yeah, the Chinese information war is one of the information wars here. They've been fighting us for generations, and now they're very good at it.
Are you familiar with the term world revolution?
Well, world revolution, I think, is an old term, but you must be asking in a very specific. You hear the lightning here?
Yeah.
That's not a war. If we were in another place, that might be artillery.
Well, the point is that people get really confused about, what's the Chinese involvement, what's the Russian involvement, and all that. And as far as from the communist perspective, it all falls under the one roof of the old world revolution movement, in my opinion. And I was just asking you if I'm on the right track or what.
Well, the common term, they're always out there, and red diaper babies are all over the place. Although most people have forgotten the term red diaper baby. Clearly, like Obama was a red diaper baby. A red diaper baby is, the original connotation was children of the Communist Party. In other words, their parents were American Communist Party members. But now widening that out, there's red diaper babies all over the place. I was just checking out Nepal this morning because of some things. I've been up in Nepal studying this. I spent a year in Nepal. I was there during the Maoist revolution, and now the communists are fighting each other because nobody fights each other like communists and other left wingers. They fight each other brutally. For instance, now there's fighting going on in Nepal between the communists, which is just completely normal. And the same thing will happen down in Venezuela and other places. And so, yeah, I'm very familiar with. I mean, I'm watching communists day and night. That's what I do.
Because part of U.S. Strategic theory back from maybe 50 years ago was to try to keep Russia and China from becoming allied, to try to keep a division between them, because when you combine the two of them together versus the West, that's bad news. And I think Russia has an interest in basically aligning itself with the West more than China, and we need to promote that.
I don't see any reason. I've said this for years. Why are we always at odds with Russia? We have a lot of common interest. There's no value for us to go to war with each other, right. At all. I've never woke up in the morning going, I can't wait to kill me some Russians today. I don't hate Russians. And I don't believe that they hate us. I don't
Well,
believe that at
did you
all.
know that the Russians played a big role in a turning point of the Civil War when they stationed the Pacific Fleet, their Pacific Fleet in San Francisco and their Atlantic Fleet in New York City, and that showed support for the Union essentially, and helped Lincoln during the Civil War.
That's quite interesting. As did the King of Thailand, by the way, but that was more not. He offered to send elephants actually, and
Oh, wow.
and the U.S. president said it was in this pickle of how do we politely say, no thanks to, because you don't want to, like, no, we don't want your great gift. This is the greatest thing that the King of Thailand could give to somebody was elephants. You don't want to insult them, but you didn't want to just, basically it would kill the elephants. So, I mean, we had a lot of, well, that was a really interesting war. And when I talk about the situation that's growing in the United States now, it's clearly not that sort of civil war, army against army. That was an industrial level war. The first, well, what was the first U.S. Civil War? The Revolutionary War, really, I would say, right? So, I mean, but to get beyond that, but certainly the first, well, 1861 to 1865 Civil War was a tremendous industrialized war by almost any standards, even today, right? But if the conditions can in the United States and the conditions continue to be set for civil war, I don't see it being anything like that. It would be more probably like Iraq or Afghanistan type, just free for all.
And you talked about Colombia. Is that what's going on in Colombia now? Free for all?
They're trying to overthrow the government, and they're trying to dispirit the police and also discredit the police with both real and conceived actions. In other words, and they do a lot of false flags as well. It's the same. It's the same formula in a different place. It's the same thing I've seen in Thailand. In the United States, we can clearly see sometimes the police actually do commit criminal actions. That's a fact. But oftentimes it's clearly manufactured, or videos are cleverly cut, you know what I'm saying? They're cut just the right way.
Yes,
They cut off and start at just the right moment. You can see a little clip is missing here, that sort of thing. It's just information war. And that's what they're doing right now in Colombia, trying to overthrow the current government. And it's competing factions. And then if the government's overthrown, it will not be like it was in Nepal. For instance, when the Maoists won in Nepal, the first thing the Maoists then did after that was start fighting each other, right? One of the things that they're doing in Colombia that they did in Nepal and that they're doing in the United States and Thailand is try to get people to speak their own languages, try to get them to defend their own cultures and stand by some often manufactured culture. Or in the case of Okinawa now, I was just on the phone with an Okinawan journalist earlier today. In Okinawa, Japan has a different dialect, right? They're putting that old dialect now on elevator buttons in buildings, ATM machines at the banks. Now the local government in Okinawa is now greeting people in the old dialect, right? They're trying to do this because China is going to make a play for Okinawa. I've been warning about this for years, and it's growing. So they've taken Hong Kong. I was there when they did that. Clearly the next step is Taiwan. And then after that, there's Philippines, of course, is in danger, and other parts of it anyway. And also Okinawa. Japan is clearly on the menu. A lot of Japanese don't quite get it. Last time I was in China, I don't think they're going to let me back. But last time I was in China, I went to the Nanjing Museum in Nanjing, China, right? That I wrote a piece called the Hate Farm. The Hate Farm. You can find it online. Michael Yon, The Hate Farm. Just look up my name, Michael Yon. Y-O-N is my last name. Yankee Oscar November, and The Hate Farm. I'm sorry, I'm outside, and everybody keeps their engines on here all the time because they like to keep the air conditioners on. And so, and there's just no place to make a nice call around here to keep tethered to a Wi-Fi, keep the signal strong, and be quiet. And so. So the information war, the first thing that they try to do is divide and conquer. They want everybody to, use some real or manufactured culture and blame anybody that tries to, steal their culture or their music. You see this fight going on sometimes between Indonesia and Malaysia. For instance, Indonesians and Malaysians will say, "Oh, the Indonesians are using our form of music, and this is wrong." And then they start these court battles. And Americans and Japanese and Thais and all these different places where I spend my life, I'm American. We often will tend to think, "Oh, it's just poor me. It's just happening to me." But I lived in Europe for 6 years as well, right? I lived in Poland for 2 years, Germany for 4 years. I've been all over Europe, and I speak German actually, and they're doing similar all over Europe. They're trying to split people, divide and conquer.
Well, they're doing the same in the US now. I mean, it's all about your identity group, who,
Exactly.
whether it's
That's what they do. That's what they do.
or
It's not
culture.
just the United States. It's
Yeah.
not just the United States. That's why when I talk with Japanese and they're trying to understand Black Lives Matter, I say just change B to K, Korean Lives Matter, because they're trying to split Korea from Japan. And I was
Right.
warning about that very clearly since 2014, and last year they finally made a hard break. They're not intelligence sharing anymore, and it was for very specific reasons that I've written about many times, the comfort women issue and other things. And so when I said to Japanese, just change BLM to Korean Lives Matter, you'll then understand, because I studied both of these, and they're the same thing served on a different plate.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds very much like what we're experiencing every day here. More and more cultural identity and more pressure to identify.
And it's designed to make us go to war.
Yeah.
It's working right now in Colombia. Right now it's working in Colombia.
Right.
And so this is an attack against civilization itself, I guess, to fragment everything so that, which is kind of the communist takeover theory. Once it's fragmented, then they can move themselves in.
Oh, clearly. They first introduced the disease and then the cure. And I'm not alluding to COVID, or COVID. That's the first time I think I've called it COVID. I mean CCP virus. I'm not alluding to the Chinese Communist Party virus. Did they manufacture it and release it on us as a weapon? I don't know, but it clearly came from them, and they clearly allowed it to spread, and they clearly bought up the protective gear, the PPE in advance. I was warning about this back in January of 2020. I masked up on January 11th because I watch pandemics. There's three things that go together in this triangle: pandemic, famine, and war. If you get a big war, you will get pandemic and you will get famine, if it's a big one. If you get a big famine, you'll get pandemic and war. If you get any part of this triangle, you get the other two. And with these will come human migration, right? So I watch pandemics. I've watched pandemics for years. I've read more than 50 books just on pandemic because I'm studying war, right? So when this pandemic kicked off, I was watching it back in 2019 when I was in Hong Kong. My live streams, I would be out there in the fighting, Molotov cocktails flying all over the place. And I would be talking about the latest avian flu or the latest swine flu or the army worms and that sort of thing in China. And suddenly this one kicked off. And then we could see, I tried to buy, I already had enough masks. I have enough masks for my entire family for years, and I've had them for years, right? Because I'm out here in these nasty places where diseases do crop up, right? So I'm very cognizant of it. And so, but then I tried to buy masks for some of my friends and family my friends in Hong Kong and Thailand, right? So I tried to buy 600 masks in Florida, and I couldn't get them. I sent my assistant out, Richard. I said, I need 600 masks. Actually, I wanted more than 1,000. And finally, I just said, try to get me what you can get. And he finally got 600, and he had a hard time getting them. I'm like, why are we having a hard time getting masks? And this would be about January 20th, maybe, right? Before most people even knew, and I was already masked up on January 11th. Before people even knew there was any pandemic, most Americans even knew, right?
Yeah.
The reason he had problems getting masks is because China was buying up all the protective gear all around the world, right? And then they were allowing their people to travel all over the world, knowing they were infected with a respiratory illness. Nobody knew what the case fatality rate was. Somebody like me that reads books on pandemic for breakfast, the last one I read was on tuberculosis, because a lot of these migrants are coming up with antibiotic resistant tuberculosis. I was very concerned about this in the beginning, and it's still obviously a concern. But every big pandemic will bring famine and will bring war every single time if it's a big one. I'm not talking these local regional pandemics like Ebola or say AIDS or HIV that spreads very slowly, kills a lot of people, but spreads very slowly and that sort of thing. I'm talking about the ones that are very acute, Spanish flu, that sort of thing. Of course, Spanish flu, one of the things that spread Spanish flu so much was World War I, right? Or the Great War. And that, next thing you know, it's spread all over, from the United States, or nobody knows where it came from. The epidemiologists will get into a big fight if you start talking about that. But, it's just amazing, by the way, how little we know about viruses. Still in 2021, a lot of people seem to think that we are like super experts on virus, and very few of the viruses in the world are even cataloged yet, So we don't understand these things. We're still in caveman days. And so anyway, I'm off on a tangent, but pandemic is something I pay very close attention to because of my work.
And so we've had the pandemic. We get the other two sides of the triangle now.
You will. I mean, that's why I've been warning since January of 2020. Stock up on food. We don't know which way this thing's going to go. It could be minor. It could have a case fatality rate of 0.0001, or it might be like yellow fever, which much of U.S. history is shaped by yellow fever, and much of the history of this country I'm here now, Panama, was shaped by yellow fever, dengue, malaria, that sort of thing.
Let's move to a more general thing. How do you think the United States is going to fare under the Biden administration? It will, and once let's just say Biden's not reelected, and let's say Trump is reelected. What is there going to be left? Is there going to be enough to pick up and still have a United States the way we knew it beforehand, or is this damage irreparable?
When this pandemic broke out, I did an interview in January of 2020 with Jordan Harbinger. You can see it online, Jordan Harbinger, Michael Yon. And right then, in January of 2020, I was saying this pandemic could cost President Trump the election. That was back before people even knew the pandemic. Most people even knew it was out there. Now, of course, we know a lot of other things happened. There's a lot of irregularities, to put it lightly. And with I'm very curious what comes out of Arizona. I wish I could be there, but I can't be everywhere. And what's happening right now? Let's go to Europe. Merkel, she put a gun to Europe's head and pulled the trigger with her welcome to Europe and trying to force Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary to take their fair share, quote unquote, of her just heaping buckets of new fish into the European aquarium, having no idea who they are, having no idea anything about their cultures. I knew that was suicidal. It's clearly suicidal. Now Sweden is now the rape capital of the world. I mean, of the Western world. It's just so transpose that over to the United States. What's happening now? This unfettered migration is epic scale. It's game changing. And as I said in my 2020 January 2020 interview with Jordan Harbinger, the world that you knew in 2019 is finished. It's over. There will be the world of 2020, and then what comes in 2021 now will be a new world. I don't know what it'll be. Well, here we are now, and now we're starting to see it.
Well, that's what I just wanted to. How do you finance yourself? Through
sales, or I'm the pioneer on self-funded work or correspondent work. You see thousands of people do it today, but one thing very few people know is I started it. I started it in Iraq in 2005. Actually, I didn't even know that I started it until people told me later. They were like, "Wow, I'm not the one that started citizen journalism. I've never called myself a journalist, by the way. I'm a writer and an author. I do other things, but I'm not a journalist per se." But in 2005, I had been in Iraq for about 8 months or so, something like that, 7 or 8 months at that time. And it was very expensive. I said, you know what? I'll put up one of those PayPal things because I had refused to work for any of the mainstream. And if you look on New York Times back at that time, they did a big article on me. It's one of the most accurate articles ever written about me.
In the New York Times. Wow.
Oh man, Los Angeles Times, New York Times. If you
Do you have a web?
you'll see pretty much everybody who's anybody was writing about me during those wars.
Do you
New
have
York
a
Times,
website?
Boston Globe. Yeah, Michael Yon.
Do you have a website to send people to? A
they can
website, Facebook?
Go to my Patreon. Go to my Patreon. Michael Yon at Michael Yon Patreon.
Okay.
But yeah, and it's self-funded. I mean, so in 2005, I was doing it out of my own pocket for more than half of a year, and that was when I said I can't afford to keep doing this, but I'm not going to work for any of these big. The reason I'm even here is because I don't trust them, and and so I have to see for myself. I don't want to go through an editor, right? And so then I said I'll put up one of those PayPal buttons. I just recently heard of PayPal. And so I said, well, let's do it. So I put that up and I was funded just like that. I was like, well, that took care of the funding. And
wow.
so, yeah. And so that was back when, I was the only one doing it. And so anybody that was going to support somebody supported me. So it was very vibrant.
Well, it was really good to meet you.
Yes.
You too. Anytime you just,
thank you, Michael.
anytime you want me on, just let me know. And, all this work doesn't matter unless I tell people what's going on, and so that's you're the other half of it. So so anytime you need me, just
for the audience, we'll have a bunch of live links to Michael's stuff below in the description box. So
mainly go to my Patreon, by the way. Go to my Patreon because that's where I put up daily. I'll put up something here in the next hour or so. Actually.
Okay.
Thank you very much.